So, Sneh, really nice to be talking to you because obviously, as I've got to know you, I've realised that you've got an incredibly interesting story, and I thought it might be nice to share that with people a bit. Would you like to start off by just telling us a little bit about your kind of early life, because I know you had quite a few different careers through that as well.
Yeah, born in Kenya, and I became educated in Kenya. I left there at the age of 17 and went to Germany. Loved living in Kenya, loved being there, but I just didn't see any future for me. And I could just see my parents marrying me off. So that wasn't a life that I wanted. So I fought with them, went to Germany. I lived there. And that was actually my first initiation into disability, because the family that I was living with had a son who was the same age as I was. And he was both physically and intellectually disabled. But living with that family and living with that young man for a year and a half actually gave me a very deep insight into disability. So anyway, I spent time with the family. I learned about disability. I then went to England, came to England because my parents had arrived there. And I carried on with my nursing. I started my nursing in Germany and I carried on with my nursing in the UK. And then kind of, circumstances and life changes, and suddenly a door opened for me, which led me into television. I never leave any stone unturned. I never give up any opportunity. I always push it. So I got into television. I was one of the first Indian actresses on UK television.
Wow.
Way back.
And what was that? What was the program or whatever?
Well, I actually started off with, I don't know if you remember, oh my God, I don't know if you remember Sale of the Century, Nicholas Parsons' Sale of the Century.
Yes, of course. It was my Saturday evening when I was a kid. Yeah, Saturday evening staple.
I'm one of these, pretty hostesses with Nicholas Parsons. And then actually there was a journalist from the Daily Mail who came to interview Nicholas, chatting to us, and he said, "Oh, so what are you going to do next?" And I said, "I don't know, whatever comes next. If it's acting, then that, And he said, "Oh, sale hostesses never get anywhere, really." And I thought, "Oh, you pig-headed journalist, So no, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you." And so I kind of got myself an agent, and I started doing little bits and pieces, walk-ons, and then they got slightly bigger, and then I landed myself, because they were looking for a young Indian girl, doing a drama documentary, and it was looking at 3 generations of Indians living in the UK. So this was an amazing drama documentary, and when it was finished, they had a premiere for it, a press release for it, and press showing for it in Soho. And so the director said to me, "Is there anybody you want to invite?" And I said, "Yeah, there's that Daily Mail journalist I want to invite." And
that's nice.
And other than that, I don't want to invite him. I just want this guy to come, And he came, bless his heart, he came. He saw the whole 90-minute documentary, and then everybody was up and having drinks, and and he caught my eye from across the room, and he came straight over, bless his heart. He came straight over. He said, "I remember you." I said, "Yeah, and you should." He gave me a half-page spread in the Daily Mail, which was just amazing for the show. But then, work as an Indian actress was very limited in the UK at the time, very limited. And I was really limited to kind of doing the arranged marriage subject, in quotes, running away from, getting into, parents getting me into. These were the characters that I was playing most of the time. And it became kind of quite boring in the end. So I turned my hand at education. This is why I like this video creation that I'm doing so much, because BBC Education was doing a lot of language shows, but they weren't, they were mostly European, French, German, Spanish, and I felt that Hindi and Urdu were such live languages, meaning they were right at the doorstep of the public of the UK, the citizens of the UK.
Absolutely. I mean, they must be two of the most widely spoken languages in the UK, I would think, as second languages. The first language is often as well, yeah.
Absolutely. But I felt that there was a gap between, people like teachers, for instance, and parents of Indian kids. They would do really well this is the teachers would do really well if they could learn at least some basic Hindi or Urdu. So those parents, the same with doctors and lawyers and, and people in government offices. We managed to get some money to make a pilot. And that pilot show, when they kind of checked it around, with focus groups, seemed to be a good idea. And so we did a Hindi Urdu Bolchal language series. It was one of the most successful language series that the BBC had done. And I loved it. And that's where my kind of interest in languages peaked, my interest in behind the camera work. That is what took me to behind the cameras. I found that process much more enjoyable. Just like now in this video, your video creation course, what I find really interesting is that I have another lot of skill sets which help me to really tie all the elements, the sound and the B-rolls and, in front of the camera, but then knitting it together and bringing it together in the edit. I was always kind of really scared about anything that needed to be edited. I always felt, God, this is such a complicated process. It's such a finicky process. I don't think I would have the brains for it, but it's been. I think
a lack of brains is your problem. You've done so many things, and clearly you're so proactive about finding things. And that's what I really love about your story, I think, is the way that you've moved on and on and on into different things, and it sounds like an endless curiosity. So how did you get involved in the school?
The more I kind of started doing stuff behind the cameras, and that also started with the BBC Hindi Urdu Bolchal, and then I went on to really working in production. I did commercials, I did films, a little bit of TV, and then in '96, when the BBC were wanting to do a 2-part big, huge, major series in India, and I wanted to spend more time in India, they said, okay, well, why don't you work with this particular production company and you go and spend time in India? Those 2 shows were going to take a year and a half to make. They did take a year and a half to make, but it was wonderful. And we covered a lot of subjects, and education was one of them. But I did come across this school. SKSN at the time had only about 40 kids, disabled kids. But what really struck me about these kids was that these kids were very different to the disabled people that I had seen in all my trips to India. At the school, they were very different. They weren't putting their disability on show. They were really keen to have an education. They were really keen for people to come and spend time with them, but not pity them. And in fact, the time that I spent with them, they were so accomplished in how they moved and, what they did, that I actually felt more disabled myself than they did, or they were. So they made a huge impression on me, absolutely huge impression.
Sorry, can I just stop you there? I mean, that's interesting. So what do you think was special about that school, which enabled those children to feel that way, that was different perhaps to other schools or other places in India?
Well, first of all, they were like sponges. At least I felt they were like sponges, They wanted to absorb everything that you could teach them. Even if you were spending kind of 5 minutes with them, they weren't just kind of sitting back and and let there be that communication gap. No, they were kind of right into you. They asked questions. They wanted to know more from you. And the other thing that was really, really amazing about these kids was that these kids were very agile. And the reason they were very agile is because sport and yoga was like a parallel curriculum for them to the education one. And it was really, sport for them was a replacement for physiotherapy. They couldn't afford a physiotherapist at the school. And yet these kids were disabled, and so they needed physiotherapy. But sport became their physiotherapy. That kind of brain and openness to absorb information, and then not kind of be sitting there to be picked up and taken somewhere, but, you know, legs or no legs, hands or no hands, didn't make any difference. They were off. They were just away.
I guess it's developing a culture within an environment where that's the norm and that's expected, and that's what's, you know, promoted, I guess, and encouraged, isn't it? Perhaps that's
yeah, but you've also got to have the want part of it. You know, you all of us have lots of opportunities given to us, laid in our hands, you know, laid at our doorstep. How many of us take them up? How many of us, you know, even look at them as opportunities? How many of us actually then run with them? It doesn't happen all the time. So for me, these kids were a very stark difference to the ones that I had seen. And it wasn't just me. Initially, I thought, you know, maybe this is just me thinking this, you know. But then actually, when I introduced the kids to David, he was kind of immediately also struck and said, yeah, we've got to film these kids. We've got to film these kids, you know. And so we did kind of, they ended up being in the film. They didn't get edited out. And they were there for about 3 minutes, you know. But that 3 minutes was a very impactful 3 minutes. So yeah, the kids ended up in there. Year and a half later, the documentaries were finished. I didn't really want to go back to the UK just yet. I kind of started thinking of what else I could do in India. And one of the things that was always in the back of my head was these kids. So I started as a volunteer at the school and started doing small bits and pieces. And then it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And this is where I am today. I'm still here with it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And, you know, yeah. I'll put in some clips of the kids, because it is such a feel-good, wonderful story, I think, and an environment. It does feel like something very special, I have to say. Very impressive. And I was particularly impressed with, I think you told me about this image program that you've been involved in. Maybe you can just quickly talk us through that.
Yeah. So image, I've always said, and I've always felt, particularly because of how disability is viewed in this country, you know, people with disabilities are treated really badly. They're so highly discriminated. So everything that we do at the school, everything that I do at India Ability, everything that I do with SKSN points to inclusion. And as I spent more and more time with the kids, our kids became very confident in themselves or in the SKSN environment, but they still had to deal with the outside world, you know. So I felt that if using their sports credentials, using their educational credentials, if I could devise a program where I could train them to go and deliver, this is disabled people, disabled kids, if I could train them to go and deliver valuable education, valuable knowledge to non-disabled kids, how would the community view them? And so that's exactly what I did. Because
and so this knowledge is things that, because the local children, the rural schools are not so good or so well resourced or what have you, or is this because they were younger children, or both?
It's all of those. It's all of those. Sometimes things can be very simple, but just because the dots are not connected, it doesn't happen, right? Mm-hmm. When I started doing this particular program, it was open defecation. Okay, there were no toilets in the villages. Open defecation was also responsible to a large extent for polio. Mm-hmm. Most of our disabled kids were disabled through polio. So there was a kind of connection there, right? So I needed the villagers to understand my kids, particularly those affected by polio, wanted them that if they didn't wash their hands, their kids could become affected by polio, right? So how do we get them to wash their hands? Because they were cleaning their hands with mud, just dirt, or a little bit of water with them to the fields, okay, and just washing there. But then they'd come back from there and they'd put their hands, their dirty hands, into a pot of water, drinking water, and then be contaminated. Right? So looking at them and just watching these families in the villages, a penny dropped. It was like an aha moment, Their clothes were clean. They weren't wearing dirty clothes, washing their clothes. They weren't washing their clothes with mud as they were washing their mud. They were washing their clothes with soap. So it's not that they didn't have soap.
Lack of soap, yes.
They had soap. So the dots needed to be connected for them was, you're going to get polio. Look, these are our kids for polio, right? You don't wash your hands properly. This could be you. But we don't have soap. Yes, you do. There's your soap. There, your clothes are washed with soap. There is your soap. When we were going to do the sessions, when the kids started going to deliver the sessions, you ask how many people had diarrhea, and most hands went up. Halfway through, less than halfway through, first couple of sessions, and we said, okay, how many are washing your hands? And it was as many hands as went up for diarrhea. How many diarrhea in the last week or the last couple of weeks? Very few hands went up, And because we could give that kind of knowledge, this program, that kind of knowledge, which nobody in the villages had thought about, not the teachers in the schools had thought about. These kids became heroes. My kids became heroes. And then education, encouraging the village kids to continue with their education became much easier, because they saw that if disabled kids can actually continue going to school, continue having an education, they can actually become teachers, they can actually go to college, they can actually have very good jobs.
Much more opportunity.
Maybe we should take a leaf out of them,
Right. And I think you said that they did a lot of this through play and sport as well. But I think I should.
Yeah, we weren't ever in any classrooms. It was all open, And the other great thing about this program was that because we were the ones going to the villages, it was easier for us to get the adults in those villages, the parents of these kids, also involved. So their kind of demystifying of disability also took place. And the other thing is that with Image, because the kids were in charge of running the program, they were in charge of delivering it. They learn a lot of skill sets, communication, punctuality, record keeping. I mean, self-confidence,
Right.
it was just endless, absolutely endless. Yeah.
What a success story. How nice.
You.
So, Sneh, thank you. It's been so lovely to talk to you. And I think I've rarely met anybody who's had such I don't know, a multifaceted life. It's been really interesting. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much. I mean, I really can't, I can't put into words the gift of this scholarship. I feel that it was such a missing link out of the various things that I can do, that when you actually sent me that email saying, here it is, I just could not believe it. I just hoped that I was going to be capable of handling this gift, but to have such a gift is life-changing. It is so exceptional. I mean, I'm speechless about it.
I'm delighted to have been able to do it, because it's I think that it's really lovely to have been able to be a small part of the ways that you've helped other people, I think, and will continue to help other people. So I was very delighted to do it.
Thank you so much.